Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Stronger Than Steel podcast. With you, as always, John Keir and my co-host, Austin Davidson.
Heyo.
It is Season 4, Episode 11. We're talking edge rushers today. We are just over a week away from the NFL Draft, Austin, a week from Thursday. With that being said, you told me you're not going to be able to catch it again, at least not day one again.
Nope, I'm going to miss it again. Marvel Avengers Endgame comes out. I didn't even realize. I probably would have waited one more day and just gotten the next day tickets, so I would miss day 2 instead. But I'll be here for day 2 of the draft, day 2 and 3, because I have all that next set of 3 days.
Isn't that exactly what happened last year, too?
It is exactly what happened last year. I took off for Avengers Endgame like 3 months in advance or whenever the tickets dropped, and then I just didn't realize the date. And it was the first day of the draft, and I sat through 3 hours of the movie, which I was happy about. But then, I came out and I got walloped by everything happening, like who took who dropped trades, and I was like, it took so long to catch up, and I'm not looking forward to it again this year.
One thing you hopefully won't have to catch up on is the NFL schedule release, which, as we're recording right now, it will be today. We are recording early on Wednesday morning. The NFL schedules will be released at 8 p.m. No real leaks. There was a Browns schedule that was leaked, but there was no information regarding when they would play the Steelers. But I would have to imagine they aren't going to be playing in Week 1 or Week 17, at least one of those two weeks, because the Steelers have played the Browns either one of those weeks a lot recently. I feel like this year with the Browns final.
Also, the Saints are going to be up there because the Saints are fun to watch. I'm going to say the Steelers have 3, a nice even number.
I think there's still going to be a decent amount because the Steelers have one of the largest fan bases in the country. Xavier Grimble signed his original round tender, so he is officially back on the roster, and the Steelers have what looks like a potential number 3 tight end. Nothing too newsworthy here, but it's nice to see he signed it.
Yeah, it had to happen eventually, so it is news.
All right, let's get into outside linebackers. The Steelers have 4 guys returning from last season from the active roster. Most of the season, as you remember, they carried just T.J. Watt, Bud Dupree, and Anthony Chickillo, with Ola Adeni coming off of IR. And he played a handful of snaps at the end of the season, but didn't make much of an impact. They also have Keon Adams, their former 7th-round pick, J.T. Jones from the AAF, and Robert Spillane. So they have a handful of guys here, but the depth, as you already know, is kind of lacking here.
Yeah, the depth isn't good. If Bud Dupree goes down, it's Anthony Chickillo, and then if Anthony or Ola Adeni, I guess. And then after that, it was nothing last year. If you lost your second guy, it was over. Luckily, the Steelers didn't have to deal with that, but the depth seriously is lacking. Bud Dupree only got a year left as well, so that's not good. If he's not signing a long-term contract for cheap enough, it's basically time to move on, because if he wants a contract where he gets $9 million a year, that's not happening. This is a 1-year thing for him, in my opinion. I think you move on and get someone younger if that's what he wants. So there needs to be probably a replacement there. And then, like you said, depth is just lacking. Anthony Chickillo has never really been that good. He's been a pretty good special teams player. I can't take that away from him. But he's not really – if he's out there, it's not really good. I think he had his best sack of his career last season. But he's not really a good pass rusher as he is. I mean, he's bulked up. I just saw a picture of him and T.J. Watt today. So maybe he'll be better this year than normal, but still, I think that there needs to be someone added to this room, and I think that they should roll with more outside linebackers this year than they did last year, and roll with less safeties than they did last year. So what do you think about the linebacker room right here?
So you're looking at Bud Dupree's replacement in this draft. You're trying to find him. You're trying to find Bud Dupree's replacement in this draft, aren't you?
Oh, yes. Yes, you are.
All right, so
I feel like...
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I feel like it's going to take at least a second rounder, though. I feel like it's got to be a pretty high pick, otherwise you wait till next season.
That being said, I guess besides Bud Dupree's potential replacement, is there much hope for guys like Keon Adams or Ola Adeni to live up to their billing as a late-round draft pick in Adams and Adeni, a guy that flashed in the preseason last year?
I feel like there is, because there's still that open spot. I mean, they only carried 4 outside linebackers last year, but I think that they should carry more, and that would give Ola Adeni and Keon Adams, even JT Jones, a shot to make the roster. So I feel like they do have a lot to play for here, and I feel like drafting a rookie doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be kicked out the roster. I feel like they could add a 6th-round rookie, and that 6th-rounder is still going to compete for a roster spot because, I mean, you look at it after the top 3, really, none of them are really proven. Ola Adeni looked good in preseason, but that's really it. Keon Adams hasn't really shown anything. He got hurt his first season and then got cut the next. JT Jones, he was pretty good in the AF, one of the best pass rushers there, but he's still a question mark. And Robert Spillane, I only remember him slightly from the Titans, as in a preseason game, I think he got a pick 6 against the Steelers. It might have just been a pick. But he's not someone I'm really even considering. So someone could come in there as a 6th-round pick and challenge for that, a last spot there.
All right, so that in mind, we have, again, as we have been prone to doing lately, 10 different edge or outside linebacker guys, and with football becoming more positionless and more of a fluid, versatile kind of scene certainly on defense anyways, we decided to pick 10 players, so I'll list my 5 guys for you right now. I've got Chase Winovich from Michigan, Cleveland Farrell from Clemson, Brian Burns from Florida State, Ja'Kai Polite from Florida, and Porter Gustin from USC. I'll be reviewing all 5 of them in that order. So go ahead and list your 5 prospects, Austin, then go ahead and start with whoever you want to talk about first.
Sure, I got DeAndre Walker from Georgia, then I got Jalen Ferguson from Louisiana Tech, then I got O'Shane Ximenez from Old Dominion, then after him I have Ben Banagou from Texas Christian, and then lastly I have Justin Holland out of Oregon, and I'm going to go in that order, so I'm going to start with DeAndre Walker out of Georgia. He is 6'2" and 251 pounds. I chose Walker actually specifically. He was one of the only edge rushers I picked out before looking at the list, because while I was watching DeAndre Baker tape, I swear I heard this man make a play 80% of the time, and he looked like an animal from what I saw. So I was elated to see that he had declared for this year's draft, because I didn't know. He could have been any year guy. He could have been a sophomore, but I was elated to find him. So he came out of high school a top 100 recruit from Fairburn, Georgia, and decided to stay home and go to Georgia University. As a true freshman, he played in 13 games and made 9 tackles. Now, this was kind of interesting to me. Walker didn't start any games for his first 3 seasons of his college career. In 2016, he played 13 games, making 19 tackles with 2.5 for loss. And then in 2017, he still didn't start any games, but played in all 15 games, making 40 tackles, 5.5 sacks, a team-leading 13.5 tackles for a loss, 1 forced fumble, and a pass defense. In 2018, he finally got to start, starting 13 games and getting 45 tackles, a team-leading 11 tackles for a loss, 7.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and 3 passes defensed. After his senior season, it only made sense for Walker to declare for the draft. So let's get into what's good about him. Firstly, I'll say he has a powerful legs that help him really gain speed fast. When you watch him, you can see he clears so much field in just his first 3 steps as a rusher, and he's pretty fast when dropping into coverage as well. You really see it every play because he's always working towards the ball, whether he has a clear path or not. So now as a pass rusher, he's really dangerous. If you couldn't tell when I mentioned his numbers, he's pretty crazy. First and foremost, he plays with good lean and shoulder turn when he's at the top of his rush, and also can change up his rush approach to fit the situation, attacking either edge suddenly when he wants. Then he pivots around tackles and squeezes tight on the top side of the pocket to get to the quarterback. looking for the quarterback's arm to try and force fumbles. But, man, while stats only say he forced 4 fumbles, the dude is really good at locating the ball and hitting it with good timing to force those fumbles. It feels like I watched more than just the 4. Now against tight ends, he's used his long arm technique to hold the point of attack, and it works pretty well. I watched his tape against LSU, and he went up against Foster Moreau a lot, a guy I described as the top 2 blocking tight end in this year's draft, and it worked pretty efficiently there. So now last few things is that in general, he plays with low pads and good leverage, and he plays with twitchy pursuits burst on both the backside as well as the play side. So now let's go to the other side of things, and something I noticed is his movement in space is a little wonky. Lance Zierlein described it as duck-footed, so I guess that's what people call it, but I really just call it heavy-footed. Another thing I noticed, especially against Alabama, is that he could get pushed out of the play by bigger opponents and bigger tackles. So if he could, it would be ideal to add a little bit more weight for when he gets to the NFL level, but I'm not sure he has the space to add any more weight. Thinking of stuff that he needs to get better at the NFL, his recognition is definitely below average, and he doesn't really have good instincts either. I saw him get confused a few times on trickier plays. He just doesn't have a good feel, so hopefully he can improve that at the next level. Next up, I feel like he plays with inconsistent technique and toughness on the edge. I feel like sometimes I was watching a guy that could beat really good tackles, then other times I felt like I was watching Anthony Chicklow pass rush. Luckily for him, it felt like I saw a lot more good snaps than bad ones, but still. I think what would help him would be if he got better with his initial punch, because right now it's kind of slow and not that powerful. But again, if he can add a little bit more weight, that could be improved. Now, he's been recovering from a sports hernia surgery that he had in January, so he couldn't participate in the combine. But Georgia literally made a second pro day for him, and I was kind of mad about it because I wanted to see his 3-cone drill and also his 20-yard shuttle because I was worried about his change of direction and pursuit speed from his tape. What didn't happen at his literally own pro day is he didn't do any of the combine activities, at least not measured. So I don't really know what the point was. I don't know what he showed. I guess he just showed football drills. I really wanted to see his 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle, and I was a little bit disappointed. But the last thing I have to say is that his sack totals were bolstered by twist blitzes and delayed rushes as a quarterback spy. So there's that. So Walker is being compared to D Ford, and I think that's a good comparison based on his size and weight. Walker just has more production coming out and has longer arms and slightly smaller hands. So while I think this is a good comparison, I actually see a lot of young James Harrison in him. Not only in his play, but he actually really looks like a young James Harrison. I encourage anyone listening to go look up what DeAndre Walker looks like, because he looks like he could be like James Harrison's little brother. But anyhow, Walker lived up to what I saw when I was watching his teammates' tape. He has made a lot of plays, and even games where he's outmatched against bigger tackles like against Alabama, he still had 2 sacks in that game. Admittedly, I love Walker. I recognize he's a little undersized for a linebacker, but I just loved watching him play. I think he has room to add a little bit more weight to his upper body, so I think he can be a real star at the next level. Honestly, I was kind of hoping he would impress at his pro day. He wouldn't impress at his pro day, and I hope that's what happened. I really couldn't get a feel for it. I was looking it up, and hardly anyone was even talking about it, but he projects to me as a second-round pick right now. Probably an early second-round pick. He's probably just outside the first, so it's not likely the Steelers get him without trading up in the second round, but that looks like where he's going in the early second round. So that was DeAndre Walker out of Georgia. Let's hear about Chase Winovich.
Chase Winovich is a guy I've been watching for most of this past season. I watched a lot of Michigan games with the Wolverines being my second favorite college football team, and Winovich was a guy that was all over the place, and it was hard to miss him. Granted, he has that long hair, but he was just a guy that was a lot of fun to watch, and I had a great time watching his tape and kind of overviewing just the kind of player he is. So Winovich weighs in at 256 pounds and stands at 6'3" tall. One of the best athletes for edge rushers in this year's draft. I watched his games against Penn State, Notre Dame, and Michigan State this season. He's a Jefferson Hills product, so just outside of Pittsburgh. He's from just outside of Pittsburgh. Actually suffered a fractural skull and subdural hematoma when he was in junior high school after falling in a freak accident, but obviously recovered and finished off his senior season of high school and became a top edge rushing recruit. So again, the long locks reminiscent of another former Steelers great in Kevin Green. He didn't play in his freshman season of 2014, but saw significant playing time in 2016, became second team All Big Ten in 2017, had 8 sacks in 2017, and had the best mark in the Big Ten with 18 tackles for loss, and then was a third team All American and first team All Big Ten last season after another stellar year, posting 17 more tackles for a loss. So Winovich, there was a lot to like from what I saw from him. He's very reminiscent of T.J. Watt on the other side. It would be a hell of a bookend duo, if I'm being completely honest with you. Both of these guys share similar qualities. They're both quick off the line of scrimmage, and Winovich has a specialty of being able to get past tight ends. He has an effective rip and pull method to get past his blockers. He was actually most effective, though, when he crossed the tackle and tried to rush with the through to the B gap, kind of cutting across the tackle's face. This is something important to note with Michigan's defense, and that's that Winovich's numbers probably could have been better if he had played more individual football. And what I mean by that is he played more responsibly in a scheme that involved a greater result for the team, but maybe not necessarily better for him. So I've heard this talked about with Devin Bush and Rashawn Gary, that they both played to the scheme and therefore maybe weren't able to have better numbers. So that's something to look out for with Winovich as well. Winovich has great feet. They never stop moving. That's always nice to see. And he's a high motor guy, a good pursuer. He can change direction quickly and can accelerate on the dime. He's good in the open field, and he's a hard hitter. And he might not be the strongest guy, but he loves to leave his mark on the ball carrier. And he has pretty decent bend. So he's a solid rusher, and he's a guy that really is just a fantastic athlete. On the flip side, though, Winovich can be guilty of being actually too aggressive and intense in his pass rushing assignment. So much so that it actually kind of hurt his tape a bit. He would get so singularly focused on what was going on in front of him, he'd ignore what was going on around him. So the running back ran right by him with the ball while he was trying to beat up on an offensive tackle. And it's, you love to see that intensity, but at the same time, go get the ball, right? Playing into this point, Winovich, again, has tunnel vision and can lose sight of the ball, which I saw pretty quickly. His quick feet are nice, which I mentioned, but his hands can lag behind him sometimes, which creates for awkward movement. And, you need to be rhythmic when you're trying to get by an offensive tackle in the NFL. That's something he needs to get a little bit better at, is bringing his hands around to catch up with his quick feet. Bigger tackles that can reach him, if they do, he'll be washed down the line. He's not strong enough with his current build to be a solid run defender. And he didn't cover much while at Michigan. He's kind of flat-footed in space. He has the tools to get better, but he needs to be molded by an NFL coach. He also doesn't really he does not really have a counter pass rushing move. You'll see this a lot with college rushers. You'll see this a lot with pro rushers. Bud Dupree does not have a counter move, so he'll just kind of try to do his move, Winovich will, and then once it doesn't work, he'll just kind of he'll kind of flail around, and he'll just frantically try to get past his guy and get to the quarterback, which, you like to see the effort, but at the same time, he's not really doing himself any favors by using all that energy there. He needs to get some more rhythm and use better technique. Another bad thing that I noticed is that he's not great in setting the edge on outside runs. And one last thing, he's actually about to turn 24 years old, so that means he'll be 25 before his second season, which means you really need to question how much better he's going to get. So at the end of the day, Chase Winovich is one of my favorite players I've looked at thus far in the draft. I love high effort guys, and that's what Chase Winovich is to a T. He looks like he's got an adrenaline rush on the field all the time, and he might not be the biggest or the strongest, but his heart wins out. His determination and athleticism can help wear down the opponent across from him. And he needs some coaching to become a more refined player, but then again, what college players don't need that. But that being said, the fact that he's an older prospect is a bit of a red flag for me. I don't think he's worthy of a first-round pick, but I think he could be a solid rotational guy, maybe a starter at some point. Scouts seem to think he is a early to mid second round pick, and others see him falling to maybe even the third round. If I have them available for the Steelers' second round pick, I personally would try to scoop him up, but that's just me. So that was a little bit about Chase Winovich from Michigan, the long-haired defensive end. Talk to me a little bit about Jalen Ferguson from Louisiana Tech.
Well, he's 6'5" and 271 pounds, and I'm not going to lie to you. I was very surprised when I found out Ferguson was highly recruited out of college. I figured he chose Louisiana Tech because it was one of his few offers, but he was an all-Louisiana pick in his senior season out of high school, and I'm just surprised he didn't pick LSU or go out of state to go to a bigger football school. I don't know. It is what it is, I suppose. It's not even like he got to start immediately at Louisiana Tech. He got to start 5 times as a true freshman, receiving an honorable mention All-Conference USA honors for getting 35 tackles, 15 of them being for a loss, 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 pass defense. As a sophomore, he was even more of a monster after starting all 14 games, getting 49 tackles, 16 for a loss, 3 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, 2 pass defense, and ranking 3rd nationally in sacks with 14.5. In 2017, he earned first-team All-Conference honors for starting 11 of 12 games, getting 38 tackles, 12.5 for a loss, and 7 sacks. In his final season, Ferguson went absolutely insane, earning himself Associated Press third-team All-American for leading the entire nation with a whopping 17.5 sacks, a big jump in tackles from his previous years with 65. 26 of those were for a loss, which was top 5 in the nation, then added 3 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 fumble recovery through only 13 games. So, getting into it, I think the biggest thing that sticks out right at first are his numbers. He never really even had a down year. Even his freshman year was pretty good. Men's finished his college career with 27% of his tackles being for loss, and that's absolutely insane. If he got his weight up like he did going from 2017 to 2018, he would have even had sicker numbers early on, too. So just think about that. As for his actual play, I think my favorite thing about him is his play strength. Teams knew his name, and he had 2 men dedicated to him a lot on his tape, whether it be a lineman and a running back, a lineman and a tight end, and even 2 linemen at times. Man played through it and still showed the strength to set the edge and played through those blocks using his burst and lower body power. It also helps him that he can change up his pass rush approach with different moves. Like a killer spin move, I had to see him use a few times, and he has the good instincts to know when to change it up and take it inside or outside. Next up, I like how he plays with his hands. A lot of the reason he could fight through 2 men is because he could attack linemen aggressively with his hands and get them off balance, allowing for him to push through easier. Even if he doesn't get them off balance, he is pretty good at just getting unstuck from blocks with his aggressive hands. Last thing I got is analysts say he flashes the capacity to convert speed to power as a pro. So, on the other side of things, scouts have 2 big concerns with him coming out. For one, they are worried that some of his weight isn't good weight and he may need to work off some. Then secondly, and I saw this a lot on tape, scouts are worried about his effort. The dude 100% takes plays off, and if he thinks he can't get there, he just stops working towards the ball. I saw it in every single game I watched for him, and it annoyed me to no end. To be fair to him, he's not a sideline-to-sideline linebacker. He doesn't have that long speed to really keep up with guys, so it makes sense as to why he gives up at times. I don't think Ferguson offers any ability as a coverage linebacker like T.J. Watt would because of his speed. Just really fits only as a pass rusher right now because of the mass he added. Just to build upon that, he likely will not be able to chase down and take down his target on outside run plays because he just lacks the speed and burst. Now, I have a few problems with his fundamentals. For starters, he only plays with an average bend in lower body that causes him to play at higher pad level. Then he's an upright tackler, which limits his effectiveness when going to the inside. And after that, with his hard charging, downhill style of getting to the quarterback, he sacrifices body control and has caused him to struggle against pocket climbers. Last thing is that he lost leverage battles more than a few times when he can't strike and lock out early, kind of contributing to the more of he gives up on plays. But the bottom line is Ferguson is an interesting prospect for sure. I really thought he was just going to be the type of player that beats up on puppy dog opponents, So I watched him versus LSU, and I thought he did decently in the game. For sure, his production wouldn't have been as high as if he actually played at LSU, but I feel like he still would have been a pretty solid pass rusher if he did. I am worried about his laziness, though. With both his weight and how he plays, he needs to fully commit to plays and being a player by making sure his weight is right. Also, his speed scares me. He ran in his pro day, and even if you take the better of his 2 times at his pro day, he would have ran the 4th slowest 40-yard dash time, the worst 3-cone drill by more than half a second, and the worst shuttle time by more than half a second as well, compared to the other combine participants. So his speed is definitely not top end. It's quite the opposite. It's really, really bad. Scouts think Ferguson is a second rounder, but personally I think he projects better as a third rounder, and I think analysts are just hyping him up because of his stats. I don't think he's a second rounder. At least if he goes in the second round, I don't think I would be whatever team takes him. I don't think I'd be happy because the speed is just so much of a worry for me, and the laziness. So that was Jalen Ferguson out of Louisiana Tech. So let's hear about Clellan Ferrell out of Clemson.
Is it Cleland or Clellan? Because I thought it was Cleland, but I honestly have not seen any information about pronunciation.
I have not watched a single Clemson game. I have no idea.
I've heard it pronounced different ways, so I'm just going to go with Cleland Ferrell for now, and I'll see if that is correct or not at some point. So I apologize if I butchered his name, but the redshirt junior, a 2-time national champion from Clemson. I watched his games against Notre Dame in the college football playoff and Boston College this season. Just a little bit about him. He missed his senior season of high school, but was still a top 10 defensive end recruit, which is kind of interesting. The former Defensive Rookie of the Year for Clemson in 2016 was a first-team All-American each of the last 2 seasons. He had 9.5 sacks 2 years ago and 11.5 sacks this past year, so he's been very productive. So there's definitely good aspects to Cleland Ferrell's game. Standing at 6'4" and weighing in at 264 pounds, Ferrell has pretty good size and has a typical frame for a rushing 4-3 defensive end. And obviously, with those stats, I didn't even mention his tackles for loss. He had 36.5 tackles for a loss the last 2 years. That's consistently thriving in the opponent's backfield, and that's something you always like to see. He has a good explosion off the line of scrimmage, and he was usually, as I noticed, the first defensive lineman across. Oh, Vegas scored. Did you get that notification?
The game ended. It's 5-0, and it's over.
I apologize. I actually get notifications too, and I have the NHL.com app, and it went off on my phone. I thought that was coming from you, but it was coming from me, so I apologize for that. But that was kind of funny. It kind of startled me.
No, that's weird, though. It's weird because you got it late. The game's been over for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, very strange. But, oh, yes, back to Cleland Ferrell. I apologize. Playing in the 4-3 and an aggressive 4-3 defensive line, he shot through gaps a lot. So like a lot of his other teammates, he was good at getting through the gaps when he was blitzing them. He has long and strong arms. He can set the edge. He can take on pulling linemen and gives them a good shoulder charge. He projects as a pretty solid power rusher, but he has a good spin move too, which is kind of a finesse move that you see from NFL rushers. He has great production, as I've already noted, and he can redirect tight ends when they're going out onto the route. He also converts a high amount of his pressures into sacks, which is something the Steelers had struggled with, particularly Bud Dupree the last 2 seasons. He's quick. He had a high-quality sack against Notre Dame and then later forced a fumble where he punched the ball out in kind of a skilled manner where the quarterback was going to the ground. And although he didn't drop much, he did cover running backs occasionally in flat routes and wheel routes, including a couple times against Boston College. He had another sack against Boston College where he came inside on a stunt. Ferrell, though, he can easily be washed down the line by a tackle because of that aggressiveness he has in shooting the gap. If he stunts inside on a running play, he's going to get taken out of the play by these strong offensive linemen. As many edge rushers are guilty of doing, he can be caught upfield trying to rush the quarterback too much, and he just didn't pop on tape to me like Chase Winovich did. Maybe it was the hair, but other than a few plays, he just wasn't super impactful against Notre Dame. He was more impactful against Boston College, but Notre Dame was a better team. And another question that needs to be asked, playing on the best defensive line in the country at Clemson, how much did his teammates make his job easier or vice versa? So were his teammates making him a better player, or was he making them better players because of how good he was? These are things that we're asking, but we're not going to know until he's drafted. Another thing with Farrell is that he's not very agile, he doesn't change direction quickly, and therefore is not great in open space, which is why he wasn't covering very often. He doesn't have a natural bend when he's rushing on the outside, and his feet will lag behind his quick hands, kind of the opposite of Winovich's problem. And he struggles to reel in quarterbacks who climb in the pocket because he struggles to rip from the outside to the inside of tackles when he's already engaged with them. And one thing that was noted that was kind of concerning is that he becomes less and less effective as the game goes on, so he might have a problem with conditioning at this point of his career. But Clelin Ferrell, a very productive defensive end in college, a former captain, two-time champion, and has good traits that project him to be a solid player at the NFL level. He's not going to be a 20-sack-a-year guy, but with more coaching, I think his solid frame and strength will help him, and he's got pretty good talent as well and a lot of experience at one of the top levels of college football. I think he could be an 8 to 10 sack a year kind of guy if he reaches his full potential. He looks like a real bona fide first-round pick to me. Some mock drafts have him linked to the Steelers, but I'm not quite sure I see that, but I'm not going to discount it completely either. If he is on the board at 20, I wouldn't be completely shocked to see him in the black and gold. So that was Clelin Ferrell from Clemson. You want to give it a whirl with this name because I forgot how you pronounced it.
Sure, it's Oshane Ximines from Old Dominion. He is 6'3" and 253 pounds. Ximines came to Old Dominion in 2014, playing in one game as a defensive end, but collecting no stats. In 2015, he made a huge jump, getting to start all 12 games, getting 32 tackles, 7.5 for a loss, 5 sacks, and 4 pass breakups. In 2016, he started 12 of 13 games, only being second string to a senior on senior day. On the year, he had 42 stops, 11.5 for a loss, 7.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries, and 3 passes defense. In 2017, he was finally recognized for his play and earned first-team all-conference, getting 44 tackles, 14 for a loss, a school record of 8.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, which was tied second in the FBS, and 3 passes defended. His senior season was easily his best, though. He finished with 58 tackles, including 18.5 for a loss, then got 12 sacks and 4 forced fumbles again, and all of this earned himself first-team all-conference honors again. After his senior season, Ximines declared for the draft. So let's get into the good about him. One of the best things that isn't really tangible, it's that coaches have said that he takes all the coaching and really studies hard on the tape to try and get the edge over opponents. So that's always good. He's a tape jockey. Then the best thing about him is probably his hand usage. He uses his strong, sudden hands both proactively and reactively in both pass and run game, and he has a really nice pop in his punch to jolt and separate from linemen. He also has a dangerous two-hand slice to soften the edge. Really, with his hand usage and advanced rush approach, using things like spin counters and inside counters, he was way too much for his level of competition. He has some serious skills. He also has really good timing. He keeps his hands and feet going synchronically and gets out the snap so quickly to gain leverage on his rush. Last thing is that he wasn't just a stat pattern. Ximines had sacks game after game and didn't just disappear for long periods of time and just go crazy in 1 or 2 games in the year. He was a constant force for Old Dominion. So going to the other side, my biggest issue with Ximines is he really didn't challenge himself at all at Old Dominion. Watching his tape against East Carolina and Liberty, I just felt like a lot of the players just weren't that good. He was like the only good one out there, and that concerns me because maybe he tore it up at this level, but would only be average if he were to be playing for someone like Clemson. Then he plays with some tight hips, and you see it in his 20-yard shuttle time. He ran a 4.57, which was second worst among participating edge defenders. And it doesn't help that his speed isn't top notch either, as he ran the fifth worst 40-yard dash time of all edge defenders. You really see it when he plays too. He's not a sideline to sideline guy, and while he has short area quickness, the long speed is just average at best. And then his closing burst and pursuit speed are also just average. It doesn't help that he takes bad angles to the ball. Some of the angles he has taken have caused him to miss some tackles as well. So something else that's caused him to miss tackles is his bad balance. Man slipped way too many times in space for my liking. He needs to play with a less narrow base. Then while he's solid as a pass rusher, his run defense is going to it's going to come into question at the next level. As he really didn't do a good job of going against powerful run blockers in college. And I would even say he struggled against the run at times just in general. Last thing I will say is some scouts are worried that he can only handle 4-3 system and might need to prove, and he might need to prove that he could handle 3-4 edge duties. So the bottom line with Jimenez is he's another guy I wish took his skills to a more challenging conference to really see how he performed. But it is what it is. He has the tools, no question. His spin moves and counters would be great no matter where he played. But the question is, will he succeed? He may be stuck to a 4-3 system as well. Some analysts seem to be questioning that, quite a few actually. So I actually don't know what to think. After look at him, I felt like he could be a diamond in the rough if he just had the speed. The speed is like the last hump I'm struggling to get over for him. Like I actually think he could have been successful in the harder conference, but the speed is just concerning me. One thing also going for him is that he could really improve his tackling at the NFL level. As something I noticed when watching his highlights was that Old Dominion as a whole was terrible at tackling, which leads me to believe coaches are at least partially to blame for the fundamental mistake. Because it's just I watched, like I said, tape against Liberty and I forget the other school already. I just said it just like a minute ago, but the tackling was horrendous. It might just be the lower level of college football, but it really seemed like it was only like on Old Dominion, but whatever. Anyway, I'm kind of on a tangent. So for draft position, I think he could be a late third rounder, but to me, he fits more as a fourth rounder. There's just a lot of question marks for me, so I think he's going to go in the fourth round at some point. So again, this is O'Shane Jimenez out of Old Dominion. So let's hear about Brian Burns out of FSU. Is it FSU?
Brian Burns, yes, from Florida State University. A tall and lanky edge rusher at 6'5" and 249 pounds. A former 5A All-Florida pick in high school. Made the freshman All-American team. Had 9.5 sacks. He was a situational rusher. And then had added 4.5 sacks with 2 blocked punts 2 years ago. Had 10 sacks and 15 tackles for a loss with 3 forced fumbles, making first team All ACC this past season. I watched his games against North Carolina State this season and Miami, one of Florida State's biggest rivals. Against North Carolina State, he had a huge tackle for a loss on the goal line. It ultimately didn't matter in the scope of the game per se, but that was very nice to see. He's a fantastic athlete, maybe the best I looked at today. He has great pursuit angles. He's explosive. He has a fantastic burst off the edge. He has quick feet and fantastic lateral quickness with a burst that allows him to choose whether or not he wants to rush inside or outside a tackle, and he can give good head fakes to kind of make a tackle commit before he makes his move. Burns is so athletic and quick, as a matter of fact. Experts seem to think that he's versatile enough to potentially play as an off-the-ball linebacker. Maybe not necessarily a middle linebacker, but maybe as a hybrid guy who plays similar to a 4-3 outside linebacker kind of ordeal. So there could be extra uses for Burns as someone other than just a rusher. I'll get into that a little more later, but he has terrific bend from what I saw. He has good loose hips with a good spin move, and he has fantastic speed, as I already mentioned, to play in the open field. He can drop into zones, chase down mobile quarterbacks, set the edge, and that great speed allows him to explode into the backfield quickly. He had a couple of big plays in the backfield, one against Miami that I remember specifically where he just shot the gap and was in the backfield before the back had a chance to even make a move. What else here? He had a strip sack versus Miami and another high-effort sack later in the game against Miami. he's going to be a nightmare for bigger and slower tackles to block when he knows he's going to be rushing the passer on a 3rd and long when he gets to pin his ears back. So he's a guy that you really do have to look out for as a speed rusher. The problem, though, as I already mentioned, standing at 6'5" and right around 250 pounds, is he's pretty lanky, and that thin frame might not be able to take on much more weight without hurting his great athleticism and speed. So as you'd expect, the way he is right now, he's lacking play strength, and he's a liability in the ground game against bigger and stronger tackles and tight ends. He doesn't have the fight in him to take on blocks at the point of attack all game long, and could you really blame him with how much smaller he is? He doesn't use his arms effectively enough, though, not using one arm to kind of extend out and keep the offensive lineman away from him while he kind of does the turn around the pocket. He'll reach out with his shoulder to engage, and that's just never a good idea. He'll have trouble with doing anything other than a speed rush, too, because of the fact that he's limited in power moves. He basically has he's basically a one-trick pony when trying to get to the quarterback. He was also blown completely out of the water on a 4th and 1 play against North Carolina State that resulted in a huge run. And what I noticed a lot of times is if he wasn't getting a sack, he was just trying to run around the offensive tackle every play. And I saw that from Jarvis Jones way too much in his career, so that does provide a bit of a concern for me. But at the end of the day, Brian Burns, another long, thin pass rushing specialist with fantastic A-plus athleticism and quickness. He is a threat to get after the quarterback and routinely made tackles in the ACC look bad, whether it be straight speed or head fakes that allowed for a quick counter. But the lack of strength is a concern, especially since scouts are unsure if he adds more, kind of what that's going to do to his overall speed, because that is his best asset right now. If he doesn't become a part-time off-the-ball linebacker, he looks like a situational pass rusher at this point. Certainly useful, but not a full-time defensive end. I think he's a late first-round pick. That's what I'm seeing a lot of, possibly an early second-rounder. But that's not to say that if he does pack on weight a little bit and still has that great athleticism, he could be a really solid player. And I would not mind having him in Pittsburgh if the Steelers took him with their second-round pick either. So Brian Burns from Florida State, maybe a one-trick pony right now, but one of the best overall athletes I've looked at in the draft to this point this season. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about Ben Banigou.
Well, he's from Texas Christian, or better known as TCU. He is 6'3" and 250 pounds. Banigou didn't really come out of high school highly recruited, even though he was a third-team All-State pick coming out of a very competitive state for high school players, Texas. He ended up at Louisiana Monroe and was picked to the Sun Belt Conference all-newcomer squad as a redshirt freshman for 45 tackles, 14.5 for loss, and 5 sacks through 13 games. After a pretty solid first year, Banigou transferred a little closer to home to TCU, but had to sit out 2016 due to transfer rules. In 2017, he didn't miss a step. He earned first-team All-Big 12 honors and Conference Defensive Newcomer of the Year for his 55 tackles, 6.5 for a loss, 8.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. As a senior, he was the first-team All-Conference selection for his 57 tackles, a team-high 18 of those being for a loss, another 8.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 2 fumble recoveries, including 1 for a touchdown through 13 games. Following his senior season, he declared for the draft. So, what's good about Banigou? He probably raised his stock at the combine after having both the best vertical and broad jump amongst edge rushers, the 4th best 20-yard shuttle, and the 6th best 40-yard dash. Essentially, he's got a lot of good to work with. His speed and agility have helped him track and take down scrambling opponents with ease, and also allows him to alter his rush from edge to edge. Speaking of edge to edge, Banigou has great play speed and does appear to be a sideline-to-sideline linebacker. I saw him book it to the sidelines quite a few times, so I know he can contain those outside runs. Then in terms of his pass rushing, he plays with good awareness and uses different moves like an inside-out move to move the tackles and squeeze them down so he has a better outside track. He could also push a tackle up the pocket and use spin moves to get back underneath. I saw this a lot in the game against Texas. This is probably the man's best move. He can also come in on a slant to cross face tackles and penetrate the gap. The last thing I will say is he's capable to punch and play off most tight end blocks. The only guy I saw him struggle with was John's prospect, Wesco from West Virginia. And essentially, John described him as another lineman out there, and that's like the only tight end I saw him struggle with. So, but going to the other side of things, something I noticed was he didn't really have the lower body strength. He really struggles to push through blocks because he couldn't really drive his legs. So I think he should add some muscle mass to his core and legs. I think it would help him a lot. I think he has room on his frame as well. So as of right now, strength really hurts him in both pass and rush defense. I saw that against linemen and Wesco. So it's not even just linemen either. Again, I really think he needs to get his strength up if he wants to be an NFL pass rusher. He may even struggle to set the edge right now. Then I feel like his pass rushing was very predictable. He seemed to always go for inside moves and not really much else. And predictability is bad in the NFL. He doesn't use his hands as much as he should when pass rushing either, so he's going to need to improve his usage there as well. Then I talked about his sideline-to-sideline speed, but he doesn't use that upfield burst enough of the time to burn the edge. Lastly, he has a lot of missed tackles because of poor positioning and balance in college, so he'll need to get that fixed up as well if he wants to succeed. But before his combine, I would have projected Panagu as a late 5th-round pick or an early 6th-round pick. His strength would be my main concern holding me back, because I feel like he might really struggle early on with NFL strength. But if he could just get that up, I think Panagu could develop into a great pass rusher with some help from NFL coaches adding to his toolbox. After his combine, though, I now think Panagu is a late 4th to early 5th-round kind of guy. His speed is desirable for a guy his size, and with all that bad, I feel like he still has a lot to offer and a lot to develop. I feel like he's going to be a guy that can be used on special teams as well. He seems like he would be pretty solid on it, but that's really just a shot in the dark, really. I like athletes for special teams. I couldn't find any information on whether he played special teams. I don't think he did, but I feel like at the NFL level he could. So I'm going to say that as a shot in the dark. But yeah, so that was Ben Panagu out of TCU. Now, I when I saw the name, every time I saw the name, I thought it was Jachai Polite, but I saw that it's not pronounced that way. So let's hear about your prospect out of Florida.
Jachai Polite. That's how you say his name. Jachai. Jachai. All right. Because every time I saw the name in like mock drafts, I was like, oh yeah, that's Jachai or something like that. But Jachai Polite. All right. And even if you don't know him for just the name, if that name sounds familiar, it's probably not for a good reason, because he has had one of the worst, if not the worst, overall pre-draft process of any prospect in the draft this year. So he struggled with his pre-draft interviews, and he actually performed really badly at the NFL Combine, injuring himself during the 20-yard shuttle drill. And he tried doing the drill again several times and ran one of the worst 40-yard dash times of the edge rushers in this year's class. So he's really starting to slip, and I'll get into that in a minute. But Jachai was an all-Florida pick as a junior in high school. Was originally an interior defensive lineman as a freshman, but kicked to the outside as a sophomore, and then actually started just 5 of 13 games this year in 2018, but was still a second-team All-American after posting 11 sacks, 45 tackles, and 17.5 of his tackles going for a loss. So even though he wasn't a full-time starter, he was still contributing a lot. So what I like from Jachai Polite, he's a multiple-move pass rusher. He's instinctive and effective, so that's something that I hadn't seen before. A guy that had multiple moves that worked well. He has a good burst off the line of scrimmage like a lot of other guys I've looked at. He guessed the snap count correctly often, which is good for now, but that could also be an issue later. He has fluid movement off the edge, especially with a good bend and quick feet. He has good closing burst on quarterbacks, and he's developed a good counter move with a nice inside rip and an improving spin move all the time. Polite likes to be involved in the run game. He's a hard hitter and a good tackler, and another high effort and motor guy that I noticed on tape. I really liked what I saw on tape personally from Polite as well. But I already touched on it. His horrible combine performances pushed him down draft boards, and his play strength was lacking this past season after he cut some weight. He has upside to be a starting edge player, but he might only be a rotational guy if he doesn't improve. he doesn't keep his head up at the start of the play, so he can lose sight of the ball. He'll get washed out by pulling fullbacks and blockers who will eat him alive, kicking him out of the play. And he struggles to get off of blocks, period. So although he likes to play the run game, he's not necessarily good at it. He doesn't have strong hands, and he should have finished off more sacks in games that I watched where he had an opportunity to get a sack, but as we've seen all too often, they come up short, and Polite came up short a few times. He's also not a great tackler in terms of just physical strength. He'll get a lot of tackles, and he's a solid tackler, but he'll bring down the ball carrier on top of him more often rather than trying to drive through, which is not something you really want to see. Guys will lean forward past him and will carry the ball a few yards further. He's not a consistent edge setter right now, and teams are concerned about his maturity for the poor pre-draft process, and he was also benched during the season opener for the Florida Gators because he, quote-unquote, failed to meet the Gator standard. Now, I'll let you kind of guess as to what that could be. I'm not entirely certain what that was all about. There might be more information that I'll have to check up on, but obviously it's not good regardless. I thought you'd want to know, Austin, that his NFL comparison, though, was DeMontre Moore.
That's my man. That's my man from the San Diego Fleet. I love that man. Or, well, I guess now he's a 49er and the Fleet don't exist, but I'm going to pretend that he's still a Fleet man. I respect that. I like that. I mean, DeMontre Moore didn't succeed at all at the NFL level. I remember seeing just recently, I think we were talking about it, I think it was McShay put out a top 10 draft board. It was like brought back from 2013, and it was like Jarvis Jones was like number 5, and then DeMontre Moore was number 2, and just a bunch of these guys that didn't stick in the NFL were like high on the draft board. But so he didn't really do well in the NFL in the first stint. So I don't know if that's a good thing but I mean, DeMontre Moore now is lit. So.
Anyways, maybe at some point after the draft, we can take a look at maybe if these guys end up somewhere, whether it's Pittsburgh or somewhere where we might see them often, maybe we could take a little look at the tape, and I'll let you kind of decide whether or not that's a good comparison. But I thought you'd want to know, and he had some of the best tape I looked at in edge rushers this year. I think he has some fantastic tools to work with. Again, the movement is fluid with him, and he plays fast. But that being said, the pre-draft process, the poor workouts, the poor interviews, the really bad combine, his character questions, he looks like a boomer bust guy at this point. And at one point was thought to be maybe a day 1 guy, has all of a sudden slid down to possibly a day 3 pick. You know, the questions about his character are worrying, but I really, really liked what I saw on tape, and I would like to see him in Pittsburgh, but I don't think it's likely because there's been little to no interest from the Steelers, from Kevin Colbert or Mike Tomlin at the Florida Pro Day, and obviously has not been brought in for a visit. The Steelers have just one left going into the final week here, so it's looking unlikely he'll end up in Pittsburgh. But regardless, Ja'Kai Polite is a guy that I really liked, but he is a boomer bust guy at the end of the day. So that was...
I have a question.
Yes.
Before you move on. Was he part of the Florida credit card fraud scandal? Was he one of the 6 players that got suspended for that? Because like when we did running backs, Jordan Scarlett from Florida was one of them, but there was 5 other players after him that got suspended back in 2016. So was that the year he got suspended for non-Florida, didn't meet standards or whatever?
He was suspended for the season opener this year. Past year.
No, unrelated. Okay.
That would be my guess, yes.
Okay, we good.
All right, then let's transition then to Justin Hollins.
Justin Hollins, out of Oregon. He is 6'5" and 248 pounds. Hollins had quite a few offers coming out of high school in Texas, but he chose the Oregon Ducks. He got to play in 14 games as a true freshman, getting 10 tackles, with 1 being for loss. In 2015, he redshirted due to the team's depth, though, so he lost the season, but he was able to start at defensive end in 12 games in 2016, making 51 tackles, 9.5 for a loss, and 3 sacks in 12 games. Then as a junior, he got another position change, sliding back into the linebacker role. He got 59 tackles that year, 11.5 for a loss, 3.5 sacks, and that led the team in forced fumbles with 3. In 2018, he was finally recognized a little bit for getting 64 tackles, a team high 14.5 for a loss, 6.5 sacks, an interception, 7 pass breakups, 5 forced fumbles, which was tied for second in the FBS, and 1 fumble recovery, getting himself honorable mention All Pac-12 honors in the process. So I think the best thing about Hollins is his size and athleticism. Being 6'5" and 248 pounds and running a 4.5 40-yard dash is pretty impressive. And I'm sure that moved Hollins up on some chat boards after seeing those numbers together. You see it translate well on the field as well. His athleticism and movement skills are really good in both tight spaces and the open field. And he uses agility to play slippery and avoid blocks. His speed has also helped him a lot in a surprising category for an edge rusher, coverage. I would say the best thing I saw with Hollins is actually his coverage. I really only saw him in zone, but he just covers so well. I was surprised to see it. And he actually was asked to drop back more than a few times from what I saw. His speed is the predominant reason he can cover so well for an edge rusher, but his acceleration definitely helps. He can close gaps between him and runners headed for the corner with ease. Now, what I should probably be talking about for an edge rusher is his pass rushing. I already talked about his speed and acceleration. That really helps him here, as well as he gets a pretty solid upfield get-off from it. And his speed is a mismatch for a lot of linemen, which has led to a lot of sacks from him being unblocked. He actually has a special move that I really haven't seen that Lance Zierlein coined as the triple jump stride, where on his third step he propels himself past kick-sliding tackles and beats them for a sack. Even if he does get blocked, though, he's got pretty solid handwork, which allows him to punch and work around the edge. Then, while he's getting blocked, he's always looking past the block for where the ball is, trying to hunt for it. And he's kind of known for his ability to create strip sacks because of it. Last thing I got to say is he can be dangerous on his inside move if he could get some help. So, onto the other side of things. There are 2 things that really stuck out to me on tape, and they sort of go hand in hand. Firstly, he plays so sheepishly. He doesn't look to get in there and hit stick somewhere or get involved in plays. I watched him watch others make tackles against the run and a lot, and I really didn't like the lack of aggressiveness. And this occurred a lot against the run, as you would imagine. He just didn't want to stick his head in there. I just assumed that he lacked the strength because it looked like he wasn't big out there, just tall. But I found out it is literally just his play strength. That's the second problem. Hollins tied for the 3rd best bench press at this combine. And he doesn't lack the strength, but he just doesn't use it. And when I found out that his bench press was so high, it shocked me because I thought being 248 at 6'5" was a little undersized. But he had the strength according to the bench press statistics. So I don't really know. He needs to get better play strength is all I'm saying, because it's not good. Then I noticed he isn't the best at block shedding, especially against the run. I think part of it is because he doesn't want to get involved, but sometimes he does just genuinely struggle to get off blocks at the point of attack. And this was another reason I questioned his strength. He also loses leverage when forced over the top blockers on backside squeeze versus the run as well. So if you haven't learned by now, he isn't good against the run and doesn't want to get involved in it. Now, as a pass rusher, he needs to improve his hand skills to better shut the edge. As right now, I noticed he disappeared for good amounts of the game, multiple. Something I noticed as well that concerned me was a lot of Hollins' sacks weren't from pass rush skill. A lot came from either stunts or just his speed, and that's what he relies on a lot, it seems. Last thing I will say is that he should try and improve his upper body torque at the top of his rush arc to improve the efficiency and tightness of the pass to the quarterback. So, a very tall edge rusher that ran a very fast 40 for a guy his size that relies on speed and stunts to get sacks while also not really offering much help against the run and having worn number 48 in the past. All right. Who let Bud Dupree go play at Oregon when not with the Steelers? But that's really who Hollins reminded me of. There's just so many things I could cross over. The big difference is the ferocity, the weight, and coverage skills coming out of college, but the dude really reminded me of Bud Dupree. Now, this is going to seem strange after just comparing him to Bud Dupree, but while watching it, I kept thinking I felt like Hollins should change position because he's just so good in coverage, and his pass rushing left me with more to be desired. I wasn't very impressed, and so I was thinking about it, and I thought he could possibly move to inside linebacker. but his unwillingness against the run ruled that out for me. So my next thought was, well, maybe he could be a safety, but he wasn't really physical enough, and his speed would just be average for a safety. But then it hit me, and this wasn't my progression, because sometimes you hear about linebackers that could be safeties or linebackers, say like Ryan Shazier or Mark Barron for two Steelers comparisons that could have been safeties or linebackers. But I think Hollins should seriously consider switching to cornerback. He would be very raw, of course, but being 6'5" and 248 pounds and still being able to run a 4.5, which was faster than Byron Murphy and Julian Love, who are considered first and second round picks, obviously for different reasons, but it would be very interesting. He would be very raw, but I already see Hollins as a 6th round pick, as he is as an edge rusher. So I feel like it's not really a risk to just say, listen, like I can rebrand myself as a cornerback and I'll try it. Trying to like Brian Allen, but Brian Allen was on defense. Brian Allen was a wide receiver, and because he was so athletic, he was drafted in the 5th round. So I genuinely think that Hollins should try his luck at cornerback, because he would be a very tall cornerback. He'd be a freak for that, and with his weight, he could his sheepishness to like tackle against the run really reminded me of a corner, because corners don't like to get involved like that. Like besides like Mike Hilton and maybe like Chris Harris from the Broncos. So I felt like it would actually be a perfect move for him, but I don't know. Like I said, right now he seems like an early 6th round pick if he stays a pass rusher. Maybe a late 5th round because he's so athletic, teams don't want to work with it, but he just isn't very good as a pass rusher, and that's what it is. I feel like I genuinely think that if he switched to corner, he would have a better chance of making rosters because of how tall he is, and also he would offer abilities on cornerback blitzes, sort of like Mike Hilton does. He'd be very good at it with his pass rushing background. So. For a corner, at least. So that was Justin Hollins out of Oregon. Let's hear about your final prospect.
I got a question first. With the talk of Hollins and potential position changes, have you seen anything like people talking about him potentially changing positions when he gets to the NFL? Has anyone suggested that, or was that just based on what you looked at on tape?
That was a completely original thought. No one else is suggesting it. I don't know. I just kept watching his tape, and like he just seemed so good in coverage, like in zone, that I was like, well, I feel like I want to see you drop back in coverage more, but like you're not. But an inside linebacker needs to be more like tough for like against the run, because you're defending the middle. Like I said, this was my progression, and like because. I really couldn't think, for some reason, I just wasn't thinking of cornerback, because you don't usually linebackers are too big to be a corner. Like, they're too slow, too big, too slow, and they're not good in coverage, or not that good. But, like, Hollins is the opposite. He's big, tall, and fast, while also being pretty good in at least zone coverage from what I saw in college. So this thought came to me literally from watching his tape. I didn't really actually look up what much analysts had to say about Hollins, so maybe it isn't a completely original. Maybe someone else suggested it, but I didn't see it. This was an original thought that I came up with.
I'm going to have to ask you to send me some of his tape, or at least email it to our podcast email, because it has piqued my interest, and I don't know when I'll be able to get a chance to watch it, but I'm going to save a note for myself to check it out, because that you don't see a player change from that to that position very often from linebacker, so or edge, if you will. So I'm interested.
I can understand. I can't even name a player that switched from linebacker to cornerback or cornerback to linebacker. It's just not something that happens.
Usually you see safety interchanged with cornerback or linebacker, but that's it. Sometimes you'll see linebacker and defensive line. You don't see anything going like a jump. Usually safety is the bridge between cornerback and linebacker. You don't see it. You don't see them crossing that bridge, or crossing without that bridge.
Yeah, it's very strange. It isn't. It isn't a normal everyday occurrence.
So I will want to check out his tape, but in the meantime, let me switch to this. Porter Gustin, my final prospect from USC, a senior standing at 6'4" and 255 pounds. I watched two games this year, from Porter Gustin. And I should mention that they were both against USC, but they were the 2017 game and 2018 game. So 2017, I just saw the first half. In 2018, it was mostly just the first half. There was limited tape on him, but Gustin is a former All Pac-12 honorable mention. He earned that in 2016 with 13 starts, but then missed most of 2017 with a broken toe and biceps injuries, and suffered more injuries and only played in 6 games due to injury this past season, but still led the way for USC with 7 sacks and 10 tackles for loss. Gustin is known throughout the football program as a guy with a fantastic work ethic, a strict and regimented nutrition and workout plan to stay in shape. Another high motor guy I looked at, he plays every game with a high level of intensity. And then as far as his pass rushing ability, he has a strong chop used to slide around the outside of tackles, and he uses his arm to pivot his body around the blocking offensive tackle. James Harrison was really great at this, and that's something that Porter Gustin does well. Gustin produced pressures and sacks at a good level, even with his injuries, and he has good play strength in the ground game. He can set the edge and cut down on backside opportunities for running backs. He's a physical player, too. He loves to hit the ball carrier hard, and he'll obliterate tight ends who try to pass block against him. In the 2018 game against Texas, he flattened a tight end on the way to the quarterback and didn't get a sack, but forced an errant throw. In the 2017 game, one of the few games he played that year, USC had 3 sacks before halftime, and Gustin was involved in all 3. He didn't get a sack the first time, but forced the quarterback to step up into a sack, and then had 2 on his own before adding a fourth in the 2018 game I watched as well. So he was definitely an impactful rusher. Unfortunately, though, Gustin has kind of awkward and twitchy movement, and if a guy like Polite and Burns have more natural movement that involve good head fakes, Gustin doesn't have that. Opposing tackles are not going to be fooled when he tries to play a guessing game with them, and he's just too tall and slow coming off the line of scrimmage. His bend is inconsistent, and his turn around the corner is not as good as you'd want it to be. Stunts did get him inside pressures, but not sacks. He wasn't quick enough. His closing burst is below average, and based on what you're hearing, you're going to reach the conclusion that he's just not that great of an athlete. He doesn't change direction quickly. He loses speed in the process. He struggles to contain mobile quarterbacks, and he's not good in open space. So basically, he sounds like a solid thumper and a decent pass rusher. And there are more concerns, obviously, because he missed almost a season and a half due to injury the last 2 years. So when you're talking about Porter Gustin, you're getting a guy with good size and strength, but concerns with his athleticism and injury history are things that I think are really worth taking a closer look at. If he can stay healthy, I think Gustin could be another rotational rusher, but his lack of upside worries me, and the fact that he doesn't have a ton of athleticism like Jarvis Jones didn't have a lot of athleticism worries me. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com believes he'll be a late round pick between round 6 and 7, and I can see that, but there is some production and potential there, but at the same time, the injury concerns coupled with the lack of athleticism is just not something I think I would personally be that interested in taking a chance on, but it is the NFL draft after all. So that being said, we'll kind of do as we always do. We'll rank all of our prospects based on, we'll take a little bit into account of the guy that we like because, we like them or don't like them, but we'll try to rank them based on their fit with the Steelers and who we think will make a big or better impact with the Steelers. So we'll start with yours, Austin. Rank all 5 of your edge rusher prospects for me and give me a little rationale for why.
Sure. I think I made it pretty obvious who my number 1 is, and that's DeAndre Walker. He's one of the 2 draft loves I have this year. His game against Alabama really sold me on that. Even though he's a little small, he could handle some bigger and tougher opponents. Unfortunately, he may go in the early second round, but I'm hoping that since this is an edge rusher heavy draft, or maybe edge rusher and defensive line, he falls because everyone takes a bunch in the first round. So when the second round comes around, all the guys that are early on don't need an edge rusher anymore. That's my hope anyway. So after that, I have Ben Banigou. I think for the price tag that comes with him, he would be a solid rotational guy. All he really needs to do is get his strength up, and he's instantly going to be better. I like him as a rotational guy. After that, Justin Hollins. Now, this may sound weird since I went on a huge tangent about how he should change position since he's so good at coverage. But I feel like if the Steelers were willing to pay Bud Dupree that much money, they would want a player that's exactly like him as a pass rusher. Honestly, as sad as it is, he probably offers more than Dupree does, too, if he could still cover at the NFL level. Then, while a lot of people said this before his combine, some analysts think he could go undrafted. If the Steelers could get him in the 6th or 7th, I think I'd be happy. I think I'd be happy with Hollins that late. So after Hollins, I have Oshane Ximines. What really worries me is that people are worried he can only succeed in the 4-3, which would obviously not be ideal for the Steelers. I like his tape, but he doesn't fit the Steelers scheme. I didn't like what level of competition he played against, so he's 4th. But that didn't leave him last. Jalen Ferguson was last, and he's really the only prospect I actually really didn't like after looking at for a lot of things. I just wasn't happy with his tape. I feel like he's not going to put in the work to get himself into better shape and get faster. And right now, his speed can't be put on an NFL field. He's just way too slow. It was obnoxiously bad. It was by a good amount of time. And something I didn't mention is that pro days, the times are unofficial for a reason because the clocks there aren't as on time. So you can always add like at least 0.03 of a second to every recorded thing. So he probably did worse. If he actually went to the combine, he probably would have done even worse. And he was already the worst at, I think, with the 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle, and by half a second. He was already the worst by half a second. That's terrible. The fact that he's projected as a second-round pick just further turned me away from him. I think I'd be okay with him in the 3rd, but I don't know. He looks like a flop to me. He looks like he's not going to put in the work. I think he's too lazy, and I feel like he's going to pull a Jamarcus Russell and flop out of the NFL that way. Not as highly regarded or drafted, but still a similar path. So, how do you rank your 5 prospects?
I have Chase Winovich first. There's a ton of interest there between Winovich and the Steelers. He reminds me a lot of TJ Watt. Maybe not quite as talented, but he's a fantastic athlete. He is talented to a certain extent, and he plays with great intensity. He'd be a solid rotational guy right away. Brian Burns, I have next. His limitations are concerning, but his tape looked very good to me, and his athleticism offers the chance for the potential to be a versatile player as an off-the-ball linebacker, and we know the Steelers love versatility. That makes him an option in my mind as well. Cleveland Farrell has been linked to the Steelers, and he just didn't pop out as much on tape to me, but he still looks like a solid player. I think he'll be a pretty good one in the NFL, and he's kind of a safe pick, to be honest with you. He might not have as much upside, but he's the safer pick, and I think he would be a worthy addition to the Steelers. 4th, I have Ja'Kai Polite, and I really liked what I saw on tape, but his horrible pre-draft process and the lack of interest from the Steelers, I just don't see it happening, at least not right away. Meaning in his first NFL deal. So I think that this is a guy that we'll have to pass on for now, but I did like what I saw from him. And then last I have Porter Gustin. Look, injuries just always concern me, and he's not polished enough or athletic enough to be a consistent force off the edge in my mind. And he's a day 3 guy, but I just don't see the need to take him when if you have the opportunity to take any of the guys ahead that I already spoke about. All right, so let's shift to the outside linebacker depth chart in 2019. I think it's pretty self-explanatory as far as the starters go. It's going to be Dupree and Watt. The question is behind him. How many guys are they keeping and who goes where? Personally, I think Anthony Chickillo is obviously going to be back. I'm going to just assume that at the beginning of the year, he'll be the swing outside linebacker, followed by a draft pick, and then I'm just going to have Keon Adams just for the sake of having someone else other than Ola Adeni, but that's just my personal belief. I think from the top down, it gets harder and harder to see how it's going to break it down, but I think that's a pretty reasonable assumption.
Yeah, I also have five outside linebackers as well. I just have them in a little bit different order, and a little bit of change up. I have the backup as the rookie, whoever's brought in, and Ola Adeni as the 2 guys that come in if Bud Dupree or TJ Watt are hurt. then after that, I have Anthony Chickolo for special teams and emergency purposes. Really, it almost kind of doesn't make sense because I gave Anthony Chickolo a big deal for Anthony Chickolo. So hopefully Anthony Chickolo is not where I project him to be because, I mean, for what he got paid, he probably should just be the backup and just straight up. But I'm still going to have it how I have it.
I hope it does go the way you have it, because that means that Chickolo is been surpassed by two guys that can rush the quarterback relatively effectively, because we already know Chickolo is not really that good at it. But in any case, NFL news. There's one huge bit of news to get to, Austin, and it's something that Ben Roethlisberger might be interested in, and that's the fact that Russell Wilson just signed his contract with the Seattle Seahawks. A record-breaking deal. Thank you for gathering the information for me, by the way. $140 million over 4 years, $107 million guaranteed with a no-trade clause and an average annual value of $35 million. Russell Wilson, I think, is a winner here, but I think it's still a good move for the Seahawks, too, just because he is by far the best quarterback in that team's history.
I really thought they were going to mess this up. I really didn't think they were going to get this done. I was hearing all this buzz like Russell Wilson wants to be in New York, and then all of a sudden I was like, wow, the Giants need a quarterback really, really soon. So assuming that Russell Wilson wasn't franchise tagged, he would be a perfect fit for a Giants team that is just going through a rebuild with a really good running back, and they could have drafted 2 first-round defenders this year with the idea that they're getting Russell Wilson in the next coming year so they could build on the defense and work on what the other needs other than quarterback, but then obviously got all shut down. All my like thoughts and thinking about this got shut down because I didn't think the Seahawks were going to do it because it didn't sound like he wanted to be with them. But I was wrong. He got a really nice contract. He's now the highest paid NFL player on a per-year basis. And, yeah, I think it was good for both sides. I think the Seahawks needed this. I don't think the Seahawks could have let Russell Wilson go away. Like, it was kind of bad because Adam Rank, an NFL analyst, put out, just remember that Matt Flynn was the next best quarterback, the last starting quarterback before Russell Wilson. So let that sink in, which I was confused about because I thought Hasselbeck still started before then. But regardless, then Matt Flynn replied and was like, damn, bro, chill. and he backpedaled, but that made me laugh. But it really is true. Seahawks haven't had that good of quarterback history. Like, Matt Hasselbeck they're like second best. And that's where they're at. I don't know. It's just they needed Russell Wilson.
You have a franchise quarterback. There's no need to go looking for another one. Am I right?
You are right.
That is how it is and how it should be, and the Seahawks did make a good move, in my opinion. We can expand more on it later, but for now, that was edge players. We only have wide receivers and inside linebackers to go. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. If you have any questions, please feel free, as always, to email us your questions to strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com, and check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic night, and go Steelers.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below. Oh.